the whole question of how do we relate to people, situations, and things is very important. So, when we speak of spiritual realization, when we speak of meditation, when we engage in self inquiry, all of this can remain a purely intellectual activity, or it can actually touch the heart. The difference between the two is very clearly seen in the way we relate to people and situations. If it remains simply in the intellect, if there is great clarity of understanding just intellectually, even if the clarity is there, and it does not reflect in the peace and love moment to moment in our activities, through situations that always changes, going up and down, through people who behave in different ways, through our own body going through different phases, whether it be healthy or sick and all the rest, through the mind bringing forth any other past memories. So there is always the nature of the world, starting with our own body and mind and senses, as well as other people, situations, is always of the nature of going high and low, up and down. And to remain in peace and in unconditional love every moment effortlessly is the essence of spiritual realization. Otherwise, we can sometimes even feel like we understand things, we are able to speak about it clearly, or we are able to have a clear grasp of the various scriptures or various abstract topics and so on, and it can in fact be counterproductive in that it only boosts the ego and we are not living the truth of the understanding. So that is something that's always very important to be aware of. And how do we do this, or how do we bring about the practical moment to moment seeing of this? It is by the clarity from the heart that everything and everyone is a manifestation of the divine. We have to not have any need to believe in it, but simply see it. If we see this very clearly, then naturally we will have a response that is out of love and compassion. So there is a verse in the Gita, just 2 lines of the verse. This is in the 15th chapter, where Krishna says, which summarizes the whole situation for all beings. He says, Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto mattasmritir jnanam apohanam cha. So those 2 lines, what it means is, I am situated in the hearts of all living entities, and I give them both memory and forgetfulness. So it is such a beautiful verse. Matta smritir jnanam apohanam cha. Smriti jnanam is remembrance and recognition. Apohanam means forgetfulness. So what Bhagavan says in this verse is 2 things. One is the nature of every living entity, the essential nature, and the other is the activity of every living entity. The nature of every living entity is always divine. That's why the first part it says, Aham Hridi Sannivishto. I reside in the hearts of all living entities. So every living entity is essentially divine. The true essence of every living entity is this pure being, the pure spirit. And this has been mentioned in so many verses, and not just in Gita, but in all great traditions. Kingdom of heart is within you, it is said. Kingdom of God, is within you. So all the great sages, great masters have always mentioned this, that the true essence, the true heart of all living entity is divine. So Krishna says, Aham Hridi Sannivishto. The second line is equally important, perhaps more so, where he says, Matta Smriti Jnanam Apohanam cha. From me comes both memory and forgetfulness. So, what that clearly shows us is nobody is willfully acting in any way that we may perceive them to be. They are having these activities based on what is ordained by the Lord sitting within. As we know, every activity, even at the physical level, happens only because of the cosmic intelligence that pervades the whole universe. No cell can do what it does through one's own willing. I don't know, as the I that I am speaking as referring to this body, I do not know what this body is doing at this moment. There is so many infinite processes happening in this very body, which are all happening by the intelligence of the universe. The intelligence that is far beyond what the mind can conceive, what the intellect can understand. Even the great scientists will tell us that they understand maybe the tip of the iceberg when it comes to how the brain works and how every single cell works, and even more so how the atoms that make the cell work, how the particles that make the atom, if we go deeper and deeper and deeper, we find that it gets more and more and more mysterious. So, in the same way, even at the level of thoughts, words, and actions, it's all happening because of the cosmic intelligence of Bhagavan. So he says in this verse that both ignorance and grace come from him. And this is very important to internalize and recognize, because if one is acting ignorantly, we can look at them then with total love and compassion, because that's exactly what they are ordained to do by the divine sitting within their heart. So the divine presence in the heart is unaffected by the activities of the living entity. The activity can be in any which way, but the divine presence remains the same. So it is just like a mirror. There can be many mirrors, but all the mirrors can reflect light equally well, but they don't do so because there is different levels of dust on different mirrors. And so some mirrors are so nicely polished that they reflect light clearly. Some are so covered with dust that you don't even see the mirror there. And then there are some which are in between, where there is some reflection of light, but there is also dirt. So this is the metaphor that we can understand. So the dust that covers the mirror is also coming from the same source. And therefore, the only activity of the one who is realizing the truth of our own self, which is the self of all, is to help remove the dust of anyone they can out of compassion. So, if we have this attitude, then we truly serve others. We don't serve their ego, we don't serve their desires, we don't serve their greed, but we actually serve who they are. So we can still make sure that when we interact with someone, see first of all that their very body, their very senses, their very mind, very intellect, it's all the energy of the divine. And therefore, at a very basic level, if someone is hungry, to feed them, if someone is having any disturbance mentally, to talk to them and help them, these are all serving the divine. Because even activities that are not necessarily speaking about spiritual realization, but to just make sure they are not disturbed either physically or mentally, is already very essential. Because without that, obviously nobody can have the energy. If one is either physically disturbed through a sickness or through hunger, or one is mentally disturbed because of some depression or some issue, then they don't have the capacity to look within, to inquire, and to engage in any higher order activity of meditation and so on. And so, to that extent, it is also important to alleviate such disturbances, but one cannot be lost in it and make that is the other danger, where if we simply engage in what is called as philanthropic activities, then that can become an end in itself by losing sight of the higher purpose. So it is only necessary to act to remove the disturbance while always keeping the higher order bit, as it is said, that the essence of true service is to be a mirror where others can also see the divine in them. And for that, we have to first accept them as they are. If we judge anyone, everyone is sensitive naturally, they do not then even listen. So, to be able to accept unconditionally others, and it is not something one can impose upon oneself. So, for that, we have to be very clear in our heart. And that love, unconditional love and acceptance, comes only when we clearly see that it is the Supreme Being who is acting in this way through His energy in various infinite ways. And that is the Maya, that is the bewildering potency of the divine, that all kinds of activities are manifested, from the most profound and sublime to the most profane, are all manifested in this world. So it is a great art, therefore, to relate to people and yet not be affected by that energy in any way, accept them unconditionally as they are, and have the intelligence to know when to talk to them about this, when to just simply remove any disturbance they have, physically or mentally, and then simply remain quiet, because many times silently giving them the listening, the presence of our listening is alone the greatest service. And something within them recognizes that, and they become more receptive. And then sometimes we can sense that they are ready to actually listen to the truth of their own being, and then we can share. So all of this comes out of the platform of unconditional love, and that comes when we see this clearly from our heart, that everything that this body does, everything that the memory here puts out, is coming from the same source as it is happening in every single living entity. So to unconditionally accept our own manifestation and unconditionally accept everyone else, that is why if we judge ourselves, then we will naturally judge others. or vice versa. If we judge others, we are sure that we are judging ourselves too. So to not judge anyone, whether our own body and mind and its activities or the activities of others, but to engage only in service in a natural way, lovingly, then we can actually have a smile every moment, no matter what happens. Even if someone insults, if someone is impatient in a line at the grocery store, anything that happens, we can simply respond with a smile and, if necessary, speak a few words, and whatever happens comes out of that seeing with unconditional love, and the action always will be right then. So then this becomes practical living wisdom, and that is the essence of true spiritual living. That is where the rubber meets the road. And so we have to be very aware for this to manifest. That is, to be very alert to when we get pulled into the ego and start judging others and so on. If we are very alert, then we will see. Another way to look at it is also, are we engaging with even objects and people to consume them or to serve them? And there are two totally different ways to relate with people or things. Normally, the nature of ego, the nature of Maya is to consume things. We want to use people for our pleasure, use people for our needs, use objects, use food for our desire, use every sense wants to use then things, objects of the sense for its pleasure. And that is a sure way to remain in ignorance and caught in the ego. But if we flip within to engage with all objects, even let alone other living entities, to serve them, then we can naturally bring about a totally different consciousness where even the way we eat becomes an act of worship rather than just satisfying our sensual pleasure. So we can eat very simply, and naturally it will be healthy as well. We can handle objects in a very graceful way. We can move about in awareness, and we can talk to people with the same consciousness, with the mode of how can I serve them rather than how can they please us in some way. So if we have this attitude, then we can live a very beautiful life, because that gives the greatest happiness. When we are completely free of this egoic desire to be happy, then the highest happiness manifests on its own. And therefore, to be truly happy, to truly realize the inherent bliss and peace of the divine, we have to not be caught in the activities of the body and mind, but simply engage it to serve others with the only purpose of recognizing the divine within them, and when appropriate, share it with them as well.